Good evening and welcome to the Center for Architecture. My name is Jesse Lazar. I'm the executive director here at AIANY New York and the Center for Architecture. Congratulations on making it through this week. It's almost time to have a drink and end this one. So we're very happy to have you all here. This is it's been a difficult couple days for many people, and we're very happy to gather together for a lovely reason, which is to hear from some really terrific designers. We're thrilled to welcome you to Cocktails and Conversation, one of our favorite series here at the Center for Architecture in AIANY New York, which is planned by our Architecture Dialogue Committee. It was not an intentional reference to 144 Vanderbilt that me or the person I'm about to introduce are wearing pink shirts, but it did work out that way. But anyway, we're happy to have you and happy to have our speakers and interlocutor here tonight, who will be introduced in just a moment by one of the co-chairs of our Architecture Dialogue Committee that plans this series, Stephen Johnson. So I'm going to have him come up now. Thank you very much and enjoy.
Yes, indeed. I'm Stephen Johnson, co-chair of AIANY New York's Architecture Dialogue Committee, and on behalf of my co-chair, Abby Suckle, and our committee, William Singer, and Dale Cohen, welcome to the last of our Cocktails and Conversation for 2024. This program began here at the Center 12 years ago, in November of 2012, with Charles Renfro, Justin Davidson, and Toby Cecchini. And we're pleased to note that this appears to be, depending on how you're counting these things, the 75th program of our series, with a lot of cocktails and conversations in the rearview mirror. Among them is the one just after the November 2016 election, where Michael Murphy and Michael Sorkin threw out the initial script and spoke with passion on politics, space, and justice. Yesterday, the co-chairs of the chapter's Design Excellence Committees met with the chapter's incoming president, 2025 president, Ben Gilmartin, to collaborate on developing content for our programs in 2025. Ben noted that he'd written his opening remarks with great optimism and enthusiasm last week, and he found it difficult to read them again 2 days after the Tuesday's election. But he was comforted to be in a room yesterday morning with people who share the values of urban life and social justice. And we are happy to be with all of you tonight, where we are delighted to have Florian Idenburg and Carolyn Johannesson of So-Il join us to celebrate and discuss the publication of So-Il's very relevant new book, In-Depth Urban Domesticities Today. Florian co-founded So-Il in 2008, along with Jing Liu, who is in Chile tonight and unable to be with us. Born and educated in the Netherlands, Florian has taught at numerous institutions across the country and is currently professor of practice at Cornell's College of Architecture, Art, and Planning. Carolyn has been at So-Il for 7 years, was educated at Rutgers and the University of Virginia, contributed essays to In-Depth, and is a visiting lecturer also at Cornell. And Florian and Carolyn are joined tonight by Nicolas Kemper, publisher of the New York Review of Architecture. Educated at Yale, trained as an architect, Nicolas teaches at the School of Visual Arts and Kean University's School of Public Architecture. So a big welcome to all three of you, and congratulations on your book. Before we begin, we want to invite you all to join us for our first program of 2025 on January 17th with Kai Bergman of BIG, along with Diana Darling of the Architect's Newspaper, so please mark that on your calendars. And of course, our program is never complete with a specialty cocktail in honor of our guests, and it's wonderful to welcome back Toby Cecchini of the Long Island Bar in Brooklyn, who was with us for our inaugural program in 2012, and his co-conspirator behind the bar, David Moo. So Toby and David, what are you mixing for us tonight?
was not even aware that this was our 75th incarnation behind here.
I'd like to point out that we've been told previously on several occasions that it was the 75th occasion.
I don't know how I'm supposed to remember that. Am I coming through on this, in fact?
Yes.
Okay, great. For those of you who have not ever been here before and do not know what we're doing up here, you'll be greatly relieved to know that we are making you a drink. Specifically, we're making you the absurdity that we do every other month, which is trying to cobble together a drink that sort of reflects the trajectory of one or another world-class architect.
Either in their work or their biography or both.
But what we
And their taste.
always end up falling back on doing is, first of all, interviewing said architect, or architects in this case, about their history with alcohol and with alcohol. That helps us a great deal. And invariably they say, oh, I like this, hence you should do this. And we're like, no, that's not how this works. In fact, if you like that, we'll generally do something extremely opposite from that. But we didn't really do that this time. We took a combination of what we saw from Soil and a combination of what we talked about with Florian. Jing was not there at the time we talked with Florian, so we have more really from his side, but he told us a bit about Jing's early proclivities with alcohol and whatnot, and so we sort of did some spitballing together with things. But first I'll tell you what we rejected, because it's kind of funny, in terms of the garnish.
Yes, that's true.
Jing can help me with this. And then we'll get into an argument about what this drink actually is.
So before we, one of the things that we do before we have these interviews is we look at the work and we read whatever mission statements, personal statements about the firm, Wikipedia pages in the case of those of you who have Wikipedia pages. And we learn some things about the work. And one of the things that we had determined about Soil is that there is a sort of strong tendency to use veils, things that are diaphanous, things that are barriers that need to be passed through in order to gain entry to the spaces.
Sort of
Half
things
barriers.
that let in light or let in air, that let in things, and we're like, oh, this is going to be our wild garnish. We're going to make some huge thing out of perforated, I don't know, potatoes, plastic and potatoes, flowers, leaves, like we still.
There's a thing that's called, that we sometimes call bartender saran wrap, wherein we take, just as an easy way, we take like a bev nap. We take a bev nap and we put it over a glass and then we wet it and then we sort of put that down so that it's sort of a wet barrier that goes in the fridge so that you can keep a garnish that way. And it occurred to us, we were like, let's do that. Let's cover every single drink that we give to the guests with a wet napkin. And then we rejected that idea.
Because it looked in the end like a wet napkin. And we were like, we're being really silly here. Let's just make a drink.
We also investigated whether we could perhaps apply, say, drywall mesh tape to all of your drinks, for instance.
Which was really cool. We were going to make a beautiful tuile on top that would be, and then we realized this is all made out of fiberglass.
Yeah.
So,
and we realized that you were a room full of people who would know that we were giving you something with fiberglass on the top of it, and that might upset you, so we decided not to do that too.
And I actually researched, I was like, is it friable though? It might be not friable. Can we just put it on, like, stop, let's just stop.
So we didn't do any of that, but now we've told you about it anyway.
So what we did do, in fact, was we took sort of the grounding. There's a great deal of grounding in other cultures in their work, certainly Asia as well. Jing obviously came from China, but had a great deal of history in Japan, as did Florian. And so they both had this sort of like Venn diagram that pointed towards Japanese whiskey. We thought, well, that's a great place to start.
We can give that bit of background. Florian lived in Japan for 8 years, and Jing, who is from China, it turns out actually grew up partly in Japan, and apparently we were told by Florian may have been directed towards the consumption of Japanese whiskey by her father while she was still a teenager.
Growing up with her father. So we were like, well, that's kind of great. Of course, Japanese whiskey is in the ascendancy, but a lot of people who consume it or are sort of into it and whatnot don't entirely know what it is. So for the neophyte, Japanese whiskey is in fact pretty much blueprint Scotch in terms of what it's made of. Like, Japanese distillers pray at the altar of Scotch whiskey, and Scotch whiskey is composed of barley, like largely barley malt spirit, rather than American whiskeys that are largely a different mash bill, mostly corn, rye, some wheat, and a tiny little bit of barley. But effectively, all Japanese whiskey is predominantly barley malt spirit. So the template is Scotch whiskey. Scotch whiskey doesn't always play well with others. Barley malt spirit can be kind of thorny in cocktails. It really kind of seldom likes citrus at all. So you have to be very careful. Like, American whiskeys do much better in things like sours and whatnot. If you're going to do things with Scotch, you're much better off leaning towards things like spice, vermouth, things like that.
So let's keep all of that in mind, and now we'll come back to that in a second. But one of the things that Florian said to us, and this is the thing that Toby was referring to as that which we would immediately reject because we don't like people giving us ideas, is that he really right now is particularly interested in a white mezcal Negroni. Now, I don't know if you know what a white Negroni is, but it's all of the ingredients of a Negroni moved over to ingredients that are white or yellow or not red. And so that's something that he's into. And instead of doing instead of drinking a white Negroni, he likes a white mezcal Negroni. A mezcal Negroni is also a very popular thing at the moment, and so a white mezcal Negroni maps those two things on each other. We thought, well, that's fascinating. You know something about cocktails. We'll never give that to you. But in the end, after a discussion, we decided, you know what? Let's bring these two things together: the Japanese whiskey, and the reason I said to table that thing before is that there is a certain resonance between mezcal and Scotch.
Oh, actually, I think it's a very clear resonance. Like, I happen to believe that Scotch and mezcal are the two profoundest spirits, in that they have the widest breadth. They have more going on across the spectrum of those two spirits than anything. That it's just my personal sort of like. That's just my personal belief, which is infallible, by the way. So you can believe me on that. So we started thinking about the white mezcal Negroni. It was like, how can we mess around with Japanese whiskey, which is, I say on the template of Scotch, but is much, much softer in general. Like, the Japanese, everything in moderation. They never make huge outliers. Even their like peated malts are not tremendously peaty, and their sort of Highland style malts are much softer than you would have generally in a Highland malt in Scotland. So a lot of their stuff is really made to be used in highballs, to be used in different cocktails, and particularly the whiskey we're using here. So we thought, okay, let's start with the template of like a mezcal Negroni, but let's use instead a super soft Japanese whiskey, and where are we going to go with this? Okay.
White,
like the white Negroni, okay, blah, blah, blah. So whiskey cocktails right
white
now
Japanese
in the
Negroni.
ascendancy are the Boulevardier is a huge one, and a take on the Boulevardier using white vermouth or dry vermouth rather than sweet vermouth. I should point out a Boulevardier is a drink made typically of rye whiskey.
Could be bourbon. Could be bourbon.
It can be either.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
Sure.
Depending on how you look at it, with Campari and sweet vermouth. So depending on how you look at it, it's a Negroni with the gin swapped out and American whiskey in place. Or it can also be seen as a Manhattan with
Campari
rather than the bitters.
Also true.
There's sort of an academic argument about it. And the argument becomes even more academic when you then, like these two clowns, decide to make it white, and now you're using white vermouth, so does it become an old pal, which uses white dry vermouth, or is it a white Boulevardier using sweet vermouth that is white?
So this is the question. This thing that you 100% definitely don't care about turns on the question as to whether or not you think that Bianco vermouth is sweet vermouth that is white, or dry vermouth that is sweet.
Okay, let's get out of that.
Let's get out of that. Anyway.
You don't care, there was an election. You have a large drink on here. Fortunately, this is a very strong cocktail, and we were debating, like, before all this, we were debating, like, we should maybe tone this down. Should we make this just 3 ounces? Because, you know, this is a strong cocktail. I was like, come on, these are adults. Let's make the full 4-ounce cocktail for them.
And boy, are we glad we made that choice.
Yeah. Maybe doubles now? I don't know. Let's just, so here we are. This is a super easy drink, and we're gonna make it even easier. When you've seen us up here doing this, normally I have a mixing glass, anything that's like this without something like milk or citrus juice, we're going to stir with a bar spoon, a lot of ice, in a mixing glass, and then strain out. The occasional drink like this that's so clean and pure and just obviously easy, we sometimes just do on a large rock, and we stir it in the glass. And that means you don't get any dilution at all. What happens, like, I'm a huge fan of dilution. I'm always preaching about dilution. But dilution is used like garnishes in lots of different ways, and you have to sort of think about what you want the effect to be. With a drink like this, you're gonna get it, and it's gonna be like a punch in the kisser, like immediately when you get it. You're like, whoa, oh, whoa, that's strong. And what you'll see is, because there's just one rock, and so there's a little bit less surface area, it's going to very, very slowly dilute in the glass. As you're drinking it, it'll be kind of start opening up and volatilizing the aromas as the dilution comes in. And you sit here over the course of a half hour, and you'll be like, whoa, I have a completely different cocktail now than I had a half hour ago. And I'm a little crock too, so that's helpful. So what we're gonna do here is make this very, very simply. It is, a Negroni is often said to be an equal parts cocktail, and so the Boulevardier, in theory, is supposed to follow that same template, but I like to make both a Boulevardier and an Old Pal a little more forceful. So I use 2 parts of whiskey to 1 part each of the other modifiers. In this case, the modifiers are, I'm swapping out for the sort of Campari roll here, Aves, which is a gentian liqueur. That's kind of a bright yellowish. That is like, gentian is a root, a very weird, huge root that is cultivated in the Auvergne in the south of France. It has this like super, super idiosyncratic aromatic profile that is like nothing else in the world. It's sort of like radish and sort of like, I mean, you'll get it immediately when you smell it. Obviously, for the white vermouth, I'm using a white vermouth, but I'm using what's called a Bianco vermouth. And Bianco is a white vermouth, but it's a sweet white vermouth rather than a dry white vermouth. And I'm using Carpano Bianco because Carpano is possibly my favorite brand of vermouth anywhere in the world. And they make what I think is the superlative Bianco vermouth. So for the Japanese whiskey, we're using a Suntory whiskey, which Suntory is sort of the macro producer there, and they have some spectacular malts. This is their sort of, I wouldn't say entry level, they develop, it's called Toki, and it's developed very specifically for highballs and mixing. It's super soft, it's really mixable, it is perfectly lovely, but it doesn't have like crazy overt maltiness to it, like some do. So this actually serves our purpose really well, because we don't want like insane maltiness coming out of this. Now, I'm simply going to stir these a little bit. You don't want this warm. What you want is to have it cool and cooling more. So enough agitation to start to see a little bit of condensation coming out on the outside of the glass, so that you know you're not handing somebody a warm drink. But like I say, you want to have this really, really punchy in the beginning, and then you'll see how it evolves over the course of 10, 20 minutes. For a garnish, we contemplate garnishes very carefully. Sometimes people look, I mean, I wish this were just a tile of fiberglass, because that would be kind of perfect. But I wanted a little bit of aromatics in this, so we made big twists of grapefruit. So I wanted something a little bit spicy to just like inflect it in that way. But I'm just going to do what's called a discarded twist, which is you twist it on the inside face, and you'll see this sort of like spray of citrus oil fan out on the surface of it. You can even kind of tap it in there to get a little bit of oil on it, and then that goes away. Because if I drop that in there, even just for, because it looks very cool, you want to see a cool garnish in your drink, but then the grapefruit takes over everything. I just want like that little whisper of grapefruit on here, so you're like, oh, there's that little bit of like peppery citrus thing on the top, but it's not taking it over. What you have are those three elements playing around in this rig, and nothing but those. So these are going to three of you. The rest of you, just bide your time. It won't be long.
Are we on?
Yeah.
Oh, oh my God. That's it. Good evening. Very good. Happy Friday. Let's see. Hello. 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 Yeah. No. Hello. Yeah.
Hello.
Very good.
Hello. Oh, yeah, great.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I'll start off here. Apparently, the convention is to have a 15-minute presentation and then talk. I didn't know that, so when Florian said I'll give a 15-minute presentation and then talk, I said, no, let's just talk the whole time. We'll do questions. And so we're just going to jump right into things. To address the elephant in the room, is it so ill or soil?
It's a longer story. Maybe that can be the 15 minutes. We started in 2008, the office, and so Jing, we met in Japan at Sana. We ended up in New York. We had a kid. She was at KPF. I was at Sana finishing the new museum. And at that moment, I realized it was time to get and start a firm, but you had to come up with a name. There's names where the last, the names of the founders, the principals are the name, and there is names of firms that have an agenda in their name. Good example, the Office for Metropolitan Architecture, for instance. I thought at that moment, let's do both. Let's have both an agenda and names in it. So we started as Solid Objectives Idenburg Liu, which would be so ill, I think. But it was nice because it was also ambiguous that it could be soil or soil. And since we met in a place where language, which is in Japan, there's a lot of language where there's a lot of ambiguity in the words. We liked the idea that there would be multiple ways of understanding that name, because we also believe that architecture is not something that necessarily has to be read in a singular way, a singular diagram, or there's only one precise way of understanding something. And so for us, ambiguity was always something that we wanted to have both in the work and hence also in the name. So there's no prescribed way of pronouncing it. If I can continue on the elephant.
No. First, Carolyn, really, what is it? So ill or the
It's, I had a I had a collaborator ask me today how we say our name, and I had to pause and I had to pause and be like, how do we say our name? So ill, but I say it different every time. Yeah.
Okay, Florian, about the elephant.
You know the story of the 7 blind men and the elephant. Do you know this fable? It's a famous fable.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, and I think it reflects also, in a way, the architecture that we are thinking about. People maybe know this fable. There's an elephant, and a number of blind men come and try to identify what it is that they're looking at. And one touches the legs and has a conclusion. The other the tail, the other the tusk, one the ear. And they all come, to a completely different reading of what they're actually seeing. and only sort of collectively are they able to make up what it is that is what they're looking at. Oh my God, that's my phone. And it's our daughter who just came in. Yeah, it's Jing asking for her drink. Yeah, no, I think we have to just turn it off.
Florian, you want to go after it? Let's do it. Oh, okay. Okay, let me do some introductions and kind of set up our topic for today. And first, I would like to talk to that other elephant in the room. We actually, New York Review of Architecture did another event last night. I don't know if anybody was there and did a double header with Nicolas, but we did it with Datner Architects, and it was about the lack of public restrooms. It had been planned a long time ago. The title was Pissed Off, which obviously took on a double meaning in the context of this week's events. And I don't know, on the one hand, it seemed a little bit, you're like, oh, you're here to talk about toilets. But on the other hand, I think there's something actually quite important about talking about toilets, which is to say that we have seen a lot of things fail to happen on a national level because of gridlock, because people are kind of working against allowing policies to pass because of the filibuster, the Supreme Court, the split Congress. A lot of good policies have gone out to dry and die over the last 4 years. But here in New York, where we have a Democratic council and a Democratic mayor and a Democratic assembly and a Democratic Senate and a Democratic governor, we still struggle to do something like provide adequate public restrooms for everyone. We still struggle to do something like implement congestion pricing, and we still struggle to do something like provide housing. And so I actually think today we're gathered to talk about Florian's new book, In Depth, Urban Domesticities Today. And it's really, I think, SOIL has had a remarkable string of projects that are coming online or coming into being that speak to multifamily housing and provide potentials in that direction. And so I think it is actually quite important to get into those conversations and what you're doing here, because it's very easy to blame the other side, and Lord knows they didn't play fair. But it's also important to make sure that, you know, the things we can control, the places that we can improve on, we do the best we can to deliver for the whole population. Anyway, all that said, I'm Nicolas Kemper. I'm the publisher of New York Review of Architecture. Thank you so much to our hosts today. I feel so honored to have this cool drink here. I obviously work on a publication which some of you may have encountered or not, and that's most of what I do, but I have this double life as somebody who actually is a bit of a facade and envelope nerd. So the first time I actually encountered soil was actually while I was working for Laos Engineering and Design as a I had the title facade designer, and they were actually hired to be a consultant on 450 Warren, and so I actually remember seeing the plans come in to LED and everyone being like, "This is crazy." There's so much envelope here, and I remember I was actually tasked with looking up details about their thermal break detail for the balcony, and I also remember that they actually specifically asked each contractor and consultant to submit a narrative about what they were doing in the project, which was very unusual.
Did you write that narrative? Or?
I did not write that narrative. No, it was not my project. So then years later, I actually ended up writing an article about 450 Warren, which is how Florian knows me, and that article ended up in their book, which I'm very flattered by, because actually 450 Warren's gotten a lot of press from a lot of different people, but mine appears to be the only article in the book outside the firm. And it's called Cancel the Corridor. It's a critique of the double-loaded corridor, but
You're very good at titles. That's maybe it. No,
Yeah.
it's pissed off and cancel the course. Yeah.
Right, yeah. I'm Nicolas Kemper. I'm good at titles. Yeah. Anyway, that's why we're here today, and that's the subject of today's conversation. I want to start off, there's a juxtaposition. The whole book starts with a really wonderful essay by Jing, laying out, I think, actually a pretty clear kind of manifesto or objective of what they're trying to do. And it's about the house and the home, which is also, I'd say, a particularly topical right now, given that we actually have an exhibit at the Cooper Hewitt about the home. Jing leads with an ode to the vernacular home. Actually, she goes into a critique of the word house at all, which I think is kind of cool. She goes through how the word for a Chinese courtyard house, Indonesian longhouses was a ruma, I believe, Japanese engawa, French maison, English mansion, Italian villa, Japanese machiya. And she's saying all of these words were kind of abandoned in favor of the house, which actually comes from the Dutch, which really
was a little sting to me, actually. Yeah. That's how we fight our battles.
Yeah, it's really all the Dutch fault. Yeah, it's really all Florian's fault. And tell me, I guess, why do we blame the Dutch, Florian? What is so problematic about the word house?
Well, in her writing, and I think you introduced it really, really nicely. It is a reflection on what is the role of that place, that we call home. The observation was that in the Dutch canal houses, basically the idea of gathering and assembling stuff. So the typical Amsterdam canal house could be both a house to live in, but at the same time a place to store your stuff. And so when the Dutch went out with their ships and took everything from other places in the world and brought it back to Amsterdam and put it in their homes, it became not just a place to live with others, but it became a place it became an asset. And the idea of asset is the thing that is being questioned in this book. The idea that your home is, mostly something to store monetary value, be it in the house itself or the stuff you put in the house. And so I think the argument that Jing is making, and she excuses herself for not being here but being in Chile at the moment, is indeed that there is many other ways in which we can be thinking about house that is not just organized around this idea of monetary value, which is obviously what is happening with housing now, which is basically an Excel sheet that is driven by numbers, and it's an argument for looking to other values of what this home can be.
So can we de-assetize the house?
You want to answer that question? No. No, I think it is. Well, it's interesting because I do think, and obviously there's a longer story to how we got to working on these projects with Tank House, because the book has 12 propositions of homes. Some of them competition entries that we didn't succeed. We have an ADU in Los Angeles. There is real social housing for a city in Mexico, in Leon. And so in the back, by the way, you see sort of the book flipping by. We have some real books there for after you have enough drinks. Maybe you'll end up taking one home. But so the idea is really so I don't know, there's a longer story, but basically the genesis of this book came from, there was a moment when I was teaching at the GSD and I was asked to do this continued education, which is a class for people who want to pay a little bit too much money to spend 1 week, at Harvard and go home with something they can put on fireplace that says Harvard. And I was the joker, the jester in the middle, because they work on a case study in Boston with their real estate people from the GSD. And in the middle of the week, I would come in and talk about design. There would be a designer. Well, I can go into a little detail. I would start with a slide of Frank Gehry with his middle finger up. And I did that because he answered the question, and I think people are familiar with that moment when he said 99% of the stuff that's being built, in the world nobody cares about and is basically a lot of garbage. And I would say that's the business that you guys are in, which really got them super, upset, so to say, the audience there, my students, and it was to provoke a conversation around sort of values and what we are, what we're doing. And we had in the book also some of our early competitions are challenging this idea of circulation. They're challenging the idea of efficiency and ratios. And they would say, well, it doesn't pencil out. The feedback would always be nice, nice stuff, show me the numbers, it doesn't work. And so this book actually started with the idea of a pamphlet that we could hand out, at those presentations with the numbers in there to show what are the ratios, what is the way in which it could work out. It took a while, and we were able to build the first residential project in Mexico, in León, which will show up here in the background at some point, with open corridors, with very generous open space. It penciled out there because it was a project for the city of Mexico, or the city of León. So it was the client was the government, not a profit-hungry developer. But it also allowed us to it was sort of a proof of concept. And then we came, indeed, we were very fortunate to meet Sam and Seba from Tank House, who are on the back of this book as well. Sam, the son of somebody who had a cocktail event here earlier, or when was it? When was Tom Main doing his cocktails event? Yeah, so Sam Main is the son of Tom Main, so he knew what architecture could be, or a certain type of architecture. Yeah, exactly. Exactly, there you go. Yes. He also came up to mark up our drawings because he was basically marking up all our construction sets. That was very interesting. And then Seba is an architect by training as well, worked at Foster's for many years. And so that was a group that appreciated architecture, and we could finally start talking about a different type of value, which is not the value that only exists on an Excel sheet, but sort of the idea of a generosity, so to say, in space that maybe is harder to figure out on the Excel sheet. That's why we have a lot of envelope as well. But that's sort of how we ended up there. So I do think, to come back to your question, I think the discussion of how we value our homes is basically what this book is trying to raise.
And it's interesting because it traces a through line from earlier experimental projects and competitions that did not win into some very concrete multifamily housing that is actually doing sufficiently well that you get to build more of it, which is honestly an exciting narrative. Okay. Carolyn, you write your piece specifically about the envelope, which I just wanted to say, I am an envelope enthusiast. I guess also to add to that, I used to work as a facade designer. Now I actually teach a building systems course at Kane, which is also crazy. All my classmates are always like, Nicholas, you don't actually build buildings. What are you doing teaching a building systems course? Yeah. Well, it keeps you in touch with the basics. Yes. I give lectures about insulation and daylighting. Anyway, so you talk about the different layers of the envelope. Can you tell me about those? And I really like the kind of the interior bound and the exterior bound.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think the idea is, sorry, the idea is really I think we talked a lot about the house in the beginning of this conversation, but I think there's also the city, and it's really, I think for me, and I think for Soil, these projects at Tank House is really the first, one of the few first projects of really working in New York City, where there's a really, really specific set of zoning and code regulations around everything that really constrain what you're able to do, and it's why we see a lot of the same types of housing developments. And I think the point of the essay was to it's kind of talking about delaminating the envelope and looking specifically at 3 layers. So one is the zoning envelope, which you're all familiar with. That's the outermost layer. And that is really where you see housing pressed up really tight against these zoning envelopes in order to make them profitable. And what the loss is there is there's a lack of connection back to the city. So what we, the other 2 layers that I talk about are the innermost layer, which is the core. So on that side of it, it's completely constrained by, efficiency and structure, services, circulation. None of those are sellable on the market. That makes it very difficult to do something interesting. And then the layer in between, which you are quite familiar with, maybe, is the thermal envelope, and that's the one that gets a lot of attention. And that is the one we're pulling away from the zoning envelope to create space and using the circulation, the core, these things that are not sellable, and turning them really into assets for the project. So in the essay, I look specifically at the second project with Tank House, which was 9 Chapel, and it's also more vertical. So yeah, perfect timing. And I think it's in every aspect, in the plan, in the massing, in how it meets the ground, and also how the materials of the facade, this kind of veil, I think, similar to the one I'm drinking, is delaminated as well. So, and I think maybe just to end with this idea, what we start with in the process is really this idea of, again, this, not just this home, which is this isolated thing, but really thinking about the home and how it connects back to the city, and thinking of this journey from the city to home and from home to the city as part of the experience of living in a city, living at home. So walking through those layers is quite important.
How did you become an envelope nerd?
Yeah, good. I think we had to do calculations for Warren because Laos didn't want to do them. It wasn't in their scope. So we had to very tediously lay out. So after arguing a bunch about whose scope it was to do these energy elevations, which was so painful because there were so many elevations, that's what did it. No, I'm not. I think it's a little bit of an accident, but I do think, particularly with housing, and particularly in New York City, it is maybe the most. I'm quite interested in what is the most difficult thing about projects, and it's sometimes the most difficult thing to solve. So I haven't solved it yet, but.
So the things it's interesting because I think that really describes what makes, so the 3 projects we're talking about here, it's 450 Warren, it's 9 Chapel, and 144 Vanderbilt, which are the ones you've been doing with Tank House. And the reason I wrote about them was because the premise was we will have no double-loaded corridors in these multifamily housing projects in the middle of New York, and the means by which you get there, like having set up that as the premise, which is a premise that the developer was hand in hand. Actually, what was that conversation? Like, did they come to you and say, this is what we want to do, we want to have no corridors? Did they come to you and say, we want to build housing? Yeah, what?
They had never made a building in the city, and we had never made a building in the city, so we didn't know that you had to have a double-loaded corridor. Yeah, we just no, and I think it's important to know that this is not like we didn't invent something new. I mean, there's so many places in the world where these types of circulations happen, and I think it is the fact that maybe Jing and I had and also Seba and Sam have been around, so to say. So the idea that the double-loaded corridor is a given, it just never occurred. Like literally, it was never one of the schemes, so to say. Like we didn't know where we like we, what I mean. Like, it was not that we moved away from something. We just never arrived to the double-loaded corridor. But it is because it's such a bad thing. No, like seriously, like. Well, it's efficient, yes, efficient, but it does nothing else, and it's the most dreadful, I think. And people try to make it nice by doing a little, like recessing the door a little bit, or doing a little, like in hotels, or you can get a little bit more FAR if you put a window at the end. But still, there are so many other ways, and I will say we were maybe sort of people call, what is it called, like COVID benefits. This was like, it happened, of course, a lot of this, suddenly people realized, okay, I'm really happy in the street, I'm really happy in my home, I really hate everything in between, right? It's like, I don't want to be in the lobby, I don't want to be in the elevator, I don't want to be in the corridor, I don't want to see my neighbors. So, and I think that changed the role of the home, and I think maybe, in that sense, now suddenly the home has to be so much more than a place where you just end up, going to bed at the end of a long day. And I think community close to you becomes more important. People are tired of Zoom screens and Zoom rooms. And so I think in that sense, the appreciation for these projects has a lot to do with the time we are in now. A lot of people ask, what about weather? Today it's what, mid-November, and we are on t-shirts. So I think maybe some of these typologies do exist, in warmer climates. I think soon this is a warmer climate. And so, we have a snow melt in 450 Warren. I think it never has had to work. So we'll see what this winter brings. But there's questions about weather, but I think, when you come out of your building now, you still need an umbrella. So it doesn't really matter where that threshold is. So it didn't, like the double-loaded corridor was never in question. Yeah.
What were the marching orders then? How did you guys come together? Were they looking at different architecture firms? Was it?
I will be very honest. We used to have another partner for a short period of time, Ilias Papageorgiou, who went back to Greece. He was partner with us early on for about 5 years, and he met them, I think, in a bar or at a party.
Classic.
Yeah. And so we started to work, and I think the fact that we had just, our experience in designing homes was in other contexts. That's how we started to work on it. So, I mean, that's how they ended up in the office, and then we started to work. And I should say, Carolyn has worked almost on all of them, and there's a fourth project currently going on at the Gowanus Canal, so 450 Union. It's under construction, and that's actually a rental and has 25% affordability in it. So, we really tried to take some of these things, because people say, well, this is nice and fancy, but does it work? Does it pencil out, in a different market? And I think a lot of the things we learned in these buildings, we're now able to bring into that building. It's 160 units, 170. Carolyn knows the numbers exactly because she drew the whole building. but it is a rental unit. You know, it has substantially more units. We don't have exterior corridors on the 20th floor, just because you'd blow away. But there is a lot of the lessons that we learned in these previous projects that we are able to take into that project as well. So.
Lots of questions. I guess one to establish the basic timeline here. The first one, 450 Warren, it was designed then in 2020. What was the?
No, it was earlier.
2018.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, so I mean, in some ways, like you realized it during COVID, but you had set up this proposition actually well before then for yourself. The other one, which you just raised yourself. The units in 450 Warren are not affordable. Well, I mean, they are
not to architects.
not to architects. Yeah, I think you have to spend at least $1 million and easily much more than that in order to have a condo there. What were the? I've had this conversation before, and it's been said that it was the land costs and not the construction costs that led to that. Is that true? Like, what were the construction costs? Is that something that can happen?
I think it was $350 a square foot, 450 Warren, and you know it's market rate, which means we have to compete in the market of downtown Brooklyn with you know the Shop Tower and the Gang Tower and you know the other. Ultimately, people choose you know where to live within the budget they can. Afford. So those were the you know that's what the market is there. I think what is interesting is the issue of the facade. Going back to you know the beginning of this conversation where you said, "Wow, that's a lot of surface area."
A lot of envelope.
Yeah, and that's the whole point. But it does mean that in order to so initially, Tank House was unable to get a construction loan. Basically, because after trying a couple of times running it through the algorithm, they said, "Sorry, your ratios are off. You just have way too much facade for your floor area. We can't give you a loan." So they had to really find you know alternative funding than regular sort of real estate funding because ultimately the ratios were so off from the standard model, which basically says that in some way this typology is not possible within the current models of financing, you know, real estate in this city, which is really sad. If it's so far baked in that, you know, if it doesn't pencil out because of these ratios, you would never be able to build this. It was a small project, 18 units. That's why it was possible to find other ways to fund this. But through sort of a regular, you know, real estate investment fund, this would have never been possible. And that's because of those ratios. And I think that's, yeah.
$350 a square foot seems remarkably low. I guess from the toilet conversation yesterday, apparently it's to build a new public restroom. It comes out about $2,000 a square foot.
Well, let's build some open corridors. You can just use those.
Yeah. No, it's not. Which itself was inexpensive only in the context of what it cost to put an elevator into a subway station.
Yeah.
Which apparently costs about $80 to $90 million.
Really?
Anyway, so I mean, I guess I.
Yeah, we're gonna go to other questions. Clearly, we need to ask.
Should we open it up to other questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because the cleaning staff will.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
great,
Sorry.
excellent.
Yeah.
Sell some books.
Oh, yeah. That's true.
Yeah.
So we have some books in the back which we can all sign. Yeah.
It should be on, Abby. He's got. Well, we've got one on. So we're open for questions. This
Here
gentleman,
is a question up front.
Vlad.
But I want to ask
Speak into the mic.
I want to ask about the Nine Chapel wood.
It
You can
doesn't
hear
work.
me, I think.
No, he's
Does it
got
work?
it. He's got it. Yeah, it's working.
The Nine Chapel building right here. How much square footage did you sacrifice in this project, and how did you present it to the developer client to convince them following through on your vision?
So, I mean, the question was how much area did we sacrifice? And from the, okay. Yeah, so we maxed out the ZFA, the zoning area, so the buildable area. And so that was, from the beginning, mandatory, right? To max out, you have to completely use all possible ZFA. And it's not only that, then you have to use every possible deduction, which these projects are all quality housing projects, if you're familiar. There are many deductions, which, some of them make a lot of sense, bike rooms, laundry, these kinds of things. But some of them are, not necessarily super one-to-one. So yeah, it was kind of a maximization of the ZFA from the start had to be achieved. And then really, in some ways, the algorithm that we created through these projects is about building more area than you need. So all of the exterior walkways, all of the outdoor space is not part of the ZFA, completely deductible, and it increases the gross square footage so much and throws the ratio off. But what Tank House was convinced about, and what we all kind of worked toward, was that that outdoor space would be an asset and a benefit and really make units that are not overly sized, they're relatively efficient, seem much larger.
Silent crowd. Unusual.
Does anybody have any?
Oh, here we go.
Is this working?
Okay. Hi. So I'm a press student. I live around the Vanderbilt building. And the first time when I saw that building, I thought it was installation that hasn't got covered yet. Yes, it looked like pink foam. Yeah. And I was wondering, how do you guys pick your materials for all sorts of your living residential towers? Because there's quite a wide variety of different materials, and how you think that adds into the living aspect of the residents there.
I don't think it's very systematic. I got inspired for a new color for next time, because we haven't done this one. I think so. Well, let's see. For Vanderbilt, which now is referred to as the Pink Building, we were initially interested in working with precast concrete, so prefabricating the concrete panels. There was some sort of interest in doing that. We looked at other buildings that have recently been built in precast in the city. There is the AJ building on William Street. There is the OMA building down in Greenpoint. One is blackish, the other is whitish. We started to figure out, okay, how do you bring color into precast? Red is the easiest pigment, actually, so it's the one that picks it up the easiest. So that was one of the considerations. I think we had maybe 50 samples and panels, so it's a combination of aggregate, a dye, and the process basically of finishing. So there's a way to bead blast or to remove some of the surface. We went from a somewhat more yellow to somewhat more red, and we ended up here. At some point, we put it in Google Earth, and we thought this is it, but it was not. It's not a really systematic way. It's very much a search, and we have all the samples still in the office. Yeah.
There we go.
Go for it. Just yell.
Hi.
Oh, sorry.
I wanted to know how you're kind of navigating the realities of the market, like with proposals like City of Yes, or kind of dealing with the notions of meeting a certain AMI. how are you kind of like working with that back and forth of with this like space first mentality or home first mentality that you're bringing into your projects, and kind of trying to move between that, like, you know, like there's a specific type of client, I assume.
Well,
that you're
yeah.
working
So
with.
I think for us the interesting thing now, and I think it is also in here, but 450 Union, which is the rental and affordable project in the Gowanus, is because ultimately, actually, the way this journey started was with real social housing in Mexico, you know, in Leon. And I think it's very important to realize that all these things ultimately are choices that we make collectively about how we value certain things. The project in Leon, which you've seen pictures of here in the background, which is also recently Iwan Ban, our dear photographer, going back and just seeing how people live there, in some way tries to make the point that this should not be a luxury, this way of living. Obviously, New York has all these realities with regards to the market, etc. And I think for us, 450 Union now, which has, you know, rental and affordability, was a real sort of difficult project in order to sort of make the numbers work. We had to redesign the entire building to get 1/8 out of the grout between the brick in order to save some money. So we like it is. I mean, Carolyn did that, and so. But I think through a few moves, one is rotating the grid, basically the orientation. Every unit has 2 orientations. Suddenly, then this single window that you would get you know in a single orientation. We really thought, you know, how can these corridors be not these long, you know, dreadful double-loaded corridors, but how can there be sort of a journey and one that brings in daylight? Parts of the building have exterior corridors. So I think that was where we really tried everything that we were able to learn in working, you know, on these market rate projects and bring it into the affordable space. I think it's still, you know, certainly there's a lot of, this is not the answer to all the problems that are out there in the city, for sure. I think we are very keen on seeing how far can we bring some of these qualities really to affordable, you know, homes everywhere in the city that are so, you know, much needed. So,
have you seen any interest in this model outside the city, outside of the context of New York?
Interestingly enough, mostly in Canada. Canadians like this.
They like to walk outside in the winter.
Really nice balmy weather for walking outside here.
So, fellow Canadian over here. Perfect segue. How did you know? You know, there's so much out there about architects designing spaces, encouraging spontaneous interaction. I think it's very common in offices. But like when I'm at work, I don't always want spontaneous interaction. Sometimes I just want to get my coffee and get back to work. Or what you were saying, when you want to get home, like you don't care about the corridor, you know, you want to get into your apartment. So how do we as architects, given the amount of influence and control that we can have, how do we encourage like the desire to meet your neighbor and the desire to maybe like go out of your way and connect?
So in 450 Warren, Seba decided to live there, which is our client. So he actually is sort of a real world example. And he's been giving us feedback about how this goes. And I think one of the things that has been working, so you've seen the sort of walkways, you know, in the air, is that you become aware of others in your building much easier, right? Because suddenly hey, you know, on the 3rd floor, they also have a dog. That, you know, we can talk about the dog. Or the kids, you know what I mean? So in some way, it's not that you are forcing people to necessarily meet, but the awareness that these buildings create, you know, of others in your building who are not necessarily your direct neighbor or, you know, opposite, you know, in the corridor. That's basically the way it's been working. Yeah, he's not here tonight, but he's one of the biggest advocates of this, and I think it worked. And again, it's not for everybody. You know, it's 18 units. I don't think the whole world has to look like this, but it's you know, it's something that maybe we can have a little bit more of.
So if you don't want to meet your neighbors, you figure out what their schedule is and you change
exactly.
your schedule.
Yeah.
thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to kind of ask you more about if you could kind of elaborate more on the process and your kind of relationship with the clients that you do work with. Do they kind of come to you with this kind of experimental mindset and to kind of go on this kind of journey of discovery and see what you can kind of do? And yeah, I just want to kind of get a better sense of kind of how you work together and how you kind of go on this discovery.
Yeah. So I like to say that we as architects never make a building, right? It's not your money, it's not your land, it's not your labor, it's not your space. It's all you do is actually help something become a space. And so you can't, you cannot design, actually we cannot design a building, if you know what I mean. Like you can't do that by yourself. Obviously, there's this myth of people making a sketch and handing it off, and suddenly it's there. That doesn't really happen. So, I think for us, we listen and we work through scenarios. We very quickly start talking about budget. Actually, we don't design and then afterwards figure out what it will cost. But we start talking about cost actually before design, because otherwise design gets blamed for the cost, and it's often not the case, right? So you start to benchmark very early, and then we tend to work through a variety of options and just articulate them as pros and cons. And so it's a very collaborative process. I think what helps with our tank house projects is indeed that there is some architectural background on the client side, and we're seeing that more and more. So also the Canadians that are reaching out to us, they actually have architectural background as well. So I think it's funny because now maybe people say architectural education is in crisis. In the meantime, maybe everybody should get an architectural education, but not just all become architects. But I think it's great if there is an appreciation. And I will also say we've had we end up sometimes trying to sell this idea to non-architects, so to say, in the development world. And we've had a few examples where people say, fantastic, wonderful projects. I love it. I love it. I wrote one word down: inefficient. And that's the end of the conversation. So, you know what I mean? Like, I think if everything is purely driven by those ratios, it's not necessarily a way to get there. But if there's some appreciation and some understanding, then we can do that through dialogue. And we work. We work in the computer, but we also work with physical models, and we use VR actually as well. So it's a combination of things. It's a pretty messy process and a lot of iterations. Yeah.
So what you just described is the difference between architecture and development.
I think so. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I don't think the precast panel company told you the good news about pink and the bad news about pink. It's a great color, but it's the color that fades the most. So it will just get lighter.
It will turn into a white building, like the
no,
white Negroni, or not?
Always,
yeah.
It will always be pink, but different values over time.
There's a funny story about the facade. So basically, I don't know if people followed any of that process, but there was a lot of rocks that we found during the excavation. So the excavation took much longer than we had anticipated.
That great big boulder.
Yes. So the panels were actually already fading for a year on a plant in North Carolina. It's Gates Concrete that maybe people have worked with there in the South, but they had a plant in North Carolina. And we had, seen it and seen the whole process. And at some point after we got rid of those boulders, we were a year in, we gave them a call and they said, "Oh, the plant just closed. I'm the last person here. It's good you called because this is literally the last day." We still had them standing in the yard, and we had to salvage them.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, it worked.
Yeah, just right in time, like by one day.
That boulder is the last from the Ice Age with the moraine that runs down the spine of Long Island. So.
Well, I have to tell you, first of all, every time anyone has ever talked about Iwan Bond, they say, give that man a helicopter, and he is like good to go. I have seen a lot of what I think are his pictures.
Yeah, most of them.
Most of them.
And Naho
What
Kubota.
did you do to allow him to, was he happy?
He's always happy.
He's actually a childhood friend, so that's good.
So
Oh, that's spoiler alert.
a relationship. And the other thing I just wanted to share with you is I think you may have slightly done yourself a disservice because these days with books, unfortunately, most people kind of read them very quickly. So I'm afraid that your audience probably thinks they've actually now read the book.
Yes, it's true.
Since they've seen
But
it 20
I
times.
should say there is an incredible tactility to this book. It's designed by Jeff Hahn. He took the theme of in-depth, very literal, and so there's a lot on every page. There's actually some texture, and it's tactile as well.
I hope it works.
More than a PDF.
Yeah.
I hope it works for you.
Yeah, let's see. We have 20 books for sale in the back, so
more than 20 people in this audience.
Maybe. Let's see who's first. Yeah. Okay.
Well, if there
Yeah.
aren't,
Are we good? We're good. No, we're not.
I think if there are no more questions, we want to say thank you so much.
We want to thank you. You have a.
Thank you.
I think you may have actually had our largest audience since COVID.
And as far as I can tell, this is a very special night because when you go to Amazon, you can't get this book delivered until January 5th.
Exactly.
So,
they're not yet in the U.S. So
get these for the holidays coming up and all of that. Thank you.
And one shout out to the bartender. This is an incredible drink. Yeah. Thank you so much.
You.
Yeah.